Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. And as usual, we always start with a mind relaxation meditation before we resume the session. So let's sit back and relax. And the theme for meditation today is that who has led you so far will guide you further. Faith in a higher power. Our technique of relaxation and meditation will be a little different today. What we will do is just let go of everything and look at this picture. And for few minutes, just silently connect with the light that is emanating from this picture. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to think anything. Just silently connect with the energy of this picture. Just keep staring at it. Full focus, full concentration on just that little bright yellow dot in the center of this picture. This red golden realm may at first be very unfamiliar to us. But if we are able to connect to its energy meaning, how do I feel? Only then we will be able to realize that beyond the realm of this physical world exists a realm of pure, stable, silent energy. by simply shutting down ourselves from this body. And immersing ourselves, our awareness, in this golden red light. Even if for a few seconds we experience something, some form of energy, be it energy of silence, be it energy of feeling at home, be it energy of stability. Because in this world, in this realm, which is beyond the physical realm, beyond five elements, beyond science and matter, in this realm, in this dimension, nothing changes. As soon as I connect to a stable source that doesn't fluctuate, that is not temporary, that does not change with time, as soon as my mind connects to such a source, it begins to calm down. It begins to charge. There's automatic regulation of the quantity and quality of thoughts. As we start relaxing, the quantity of thoughts is already reducing and the quality is already improving, because that is determined by how we feel. Because there's one single measure if we are living our life accurately. There's one single measure for it, which is how do we feel And if we feel consistently relaxed, stable, calm, and loving, and happy, and contentful, it indicates we are living our life to its true purpose. And we only come in terms to reality when we sit in front of this image of our own true reality. The one who led us this far, the supreme power, the most stable source of happiness, of peace, of love, the supreme parent, the supreme being. Call it whatever name we want to call it. But there is some higher energy that created this world, that created human beings. And any creation has a creator and a sustainer, without which no creation can last. So this supreme power is the most stable form of energy we can connect to. And no one has to blindly believe in this. Experience is the proof of existence of this higher power. Once I experience that energy, that is my proof. Unless I don't experience it, let no one in this world convince me otherwise. So let's gradually step down from this higher awareness, this other realm of higher dimension beyond matter. Let's step down into the awareness of the body now. So we can fulfill the role meant to be played at this hour of learning. Gradually just bring your awareness down.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 11th session of Python programming. Yeah, hope everyone is doing fine. So, yeah, thank you. We'll start the session with a quick revision, what we studied in the previous class. So basically, we studied about exception handling using the try and the except. And also we studied about using the else with the for loop and also some of the methods on the dictionary. So we'll just continue from there today. So let me just, quickly go through the code which we wrote for exception handling. So here we can see the try and the except in our code. So whatever the lines you expect, wherever there is an error, you are just going to put that block within the try, and then you're just going to put a except. So here we are particularly pointing out a specific error, a value error, and also the index error. Now, if I just run this code, so it is asking enter an integer. So I will just enter 1 here. It is giving me 3 because we have created a list which has only two values, 6 and 3. So that's 0, 6 is for 0 index, and 3 is for 1 index. So if I just write 1 there, I'm going to get the output as 3. If I write 0, I'll get the output as 6. But what if I'm going to write 3 there? So it gives me index error. There is no third index in the list. So since we have used the except here, except index error, we are going to get index error. But what if I just give some other data type? If I write hello here, so it gives me number entered is not an integer because it is expecting an integer from the user, but the user is giving a string. So it is automatically going to give us the value error. All right, so this is how we just studied about handling multiple exceptions in our code. Okay, now today what we will study is about the finally keyword in exception handling. What is the purpose of using the finally clause? Let's see. Hope my voice is clear. Everyone is able to hear me properly. Okay, perfect. So here we can see finally clause. The finally code block is also a part of exception handling. In exception handling, we use the finally clause. Now, what is the purpose? When we handle exceptions, using the try and except block, we can include a finally block at the end. So the finally block is always executed. So that's a very important thing which we have to focus on. The finally block is always executed. Whatever you write inside the finally, it will be executed. So generally, what is the purpose? It is used for doing the concluding task like closing file resources or closing a database connection. Or maybe if you just want to end the program with a delightful message, you can use the finally word, the finally keyword. Okay, so for now, we just need to understand whatever you write inside the finally, it must be executed in any situation. Okay, let's see the code, then we can understand in a better way. Just a moment. So I'm going to start using the try and except here. I'll just use exception handling. So let me use try. And I'm just going to create a list here. I'll write L equals to and then I'm just going to get an input from the user. I'm going to print it on the screen. And then let's use the except here. Some error occurred. Now, if I just run the code, so there are 4 values in the list. If I write 5 here, it gives me some error occurred because there's no such index in the list. If I write 1 here, it gives me output as 5. Okay, so this is how I'm just handling an error in my code. Now, what if, let's try to just make some changes. Finally, we studied about finally, right? Let's use this word. And inside it, I'm going to print something. Okay, let's run the code. So in both the case, in both try and except, the finally will be executed. Let me just enter a correct input. If I write 1, so you can see 5 is printed, which is this input output from this block of code, and also from finally this will be executed always has been printed. Now let me give a wrong input. If I write 6 there, so error, some error occurred, then also this is executed. So finally means it will be always executed. Whether the execution goes in the try or it goes in the except, the finally is going to be executed always. Okay, but we need to understand this very carefully. What if I'm going to comment this out and sorry, and let me just use the normal print here. I'll just use the normal print. I'll write the same thing here. Okay. So in this case also, let me give the correct input. So I get the output as 6. In this case also, it is printed. If I give the wrong input, then also it is printed. So what is the difference then? You know, I can just use the simple print function here. Why I need to use the finally? In both the cases, it's giving me the same output. So what is the use of finally? Like this also, it is printing always. Whether it is try or whether it is except, I use the print function. Then also it is giving me the same output. Then why finally? What is the exact purpose of finally? Is it making sense? What I'm trying to convey? Are you with me? Are you able to follow what I'm trying to convey? Just write yes or no. Yeah. Yeah. I can simply use a print function, no? Then also it is printed, then also it is giving me the same output if it is try or except. Then why finally? Let's understand why finally. What is the exact purpose of finally? What I'm going to do, I'm just going to put this block of code inside a function. So I'll just create a function there, def. And then it's important to call that function. So I'll just write x equals to the name of the function. I have to call it. I hope you're writing the code with me. So I have called the function and I have printed the value of x. Okay, so that this is just going to give an error. So I'll just give a tab there. Okay. All right, let's run. Okay, now I'll try both ways. I'll give a correct input, and in second case, I'm going to give wrong input. So let me give 0 here. Okay, let's see what's the output. So it gives me 1. Okay, I just want to do one more thing here. Since I'm using a function, so it is returning me some value. So I will just write here, after the print, I'm going to write return 1, and in the except I'll write return 0. Okay, let's run the code. Let me write 0 here. So it gives me 1 and 1. See, there are two outputs. So it is returning, since I'm calling the function, it is returning a value. Okay, I have given a proper input. So it goes in, like it is going to, execute the normal code, because since the input is correct. So from here, it will give the output as 1. 0 index, which is 1. Okay, and then again, it is returning 1 also. So you'll get 1 and 1 as the output. 2, 1 will be there. Okay. Now I will just give wrong input. Let me just write as some character. So it gives me some error occurred. It goes in the except, the try is going to catch the error and it goes in the except and it prints some error occurred, and it is also going to return 0. So some error occurred and 0 will be the output. Okay, but see, print, this will be executed always. It is not showing here. Blank. The print is not working. The print doesn't have any power here. But what if finally, no, I'm just going to uncomment that. And let me comment this out. Now let's see the output. So first, I'll just write 0. Okay, so I get the output as 1. This will be executed always, and then 1 as the another output. So in this case, the finally, whatever is there in the finally is showing the output. Why? See, I'm using the return. What is the rule of a function? If there is a return, nothing will be executed after it. That's the rule of the function. After the return, nothing will be executed. But here, after the return, we have given finally. Then also it is giving the output. This will be executed always. So that's the purpose of finally. Even if the function is returning something, then also finally will be executed. Okay, that is the purpose of finally keyword. We are using the return here. Nothing gets executed after the return, but if you use finally, it will be executed. Okay, I hope it makes sense. That's the difference between using finally and just using the normal print function. All right. What if I give a wrong input now? Let me just write some character. Then also it is executed. Now it goes in the except because the input is wrong. So it is handling that error. And then it shows some error occurred. And then it returns 0. And after that, it executes finally also. So you get the output as this will be executed always. Okay. Is it making sense? Yes, no?
If you please
Yeah.
add the integer 2,
Sorry.
if you try the example with integer 2, if you enter the integer 2 instead of y1.
If you enter 2, okay, let's
Yes,
see
yes.
what's the output. Then 6. It gives 6 because here we have 0, 1, and 2. So at second index, you have 6. So it gives you the output at 6. And then finally is executed. We learned finally will be executed, whether it goes in try or whether it goes in except. So it also gives the output from finally, which is this will be executed always. And also it is returning 1, right? So you'll get the output as 1.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. I have a question. Am I audible?
Yeah, please go on.
Yeah. So I still couldn't understand the purpose of finally, because we could have we could have alternately included this print. This will be executed always in line number 17. So after x equal to function this func1, we could have used whatever is in finally, we could have used just after this line. So, what is exactly the purpose of finally? I mean,
Yeah, see, finally, whatever we write in the finally will be executed whatever happens on the top. If your program goes in try, then also finally will be executed. If it goes in except, then also finally will be executed. So what I
yes.
was
So,
trying to say, this can be also done using a print function. So what is the difference between using finally and the print function? The difference is that when we just put this whole block inside a function, oh, and then when we are just returning some value, then print will not work. Then if I just use the print, it will not work. That's why I just showed using the print and using the finally. But because there's a rule in function, if something has been returned from a function, nothing will be executed after it, right? So if I just comment out this finally, and if I use the print, then the print will be not executed. But if I use finally, it will be executed. Okay. So this is what I'm trying to, convey. In all, we have to just remember one thing, whatever there in the finally will be executed. Yeah, whatever happens. So that's the rule. I hope it is clear. So this is about using the finally in exception handling. That's the purpose of finally in exception handling. Okay, so I hope you have written the code and also you are satisfied with the output, and we will just move forward from here. Okay, the next thing we are going to study about is raising custom errors. How we can raise errors. See, there are two things. We studied about exception handling, where we are handling the errors. And on the contrary, we can raise errors also purposefully. We just want to give some error in our program. So that is called custom errors, raising errors in Python. Let's see what exactly it is. So here I'm going to get input from the user. That means I'm just asking the user just enter a value between 4 and 9. So I'm just going to put a if statement there, and I'll just write a less than 4 or a greater than 9. So if this condition is satisfied, then I just want to raise a error because I am asking enter any value between 4 and 9. So if user is just going to give me a value which is not between 4 and 9, then I want to throw a error. So I'll just write, see, it is called raising error. So we want to use the keyword as raise. And I would specify the error also, which is value error. And let me just write here. Okay, it should be between 4 and 9. Let's run the code. Now it is asking enter any value between 4 and 9. So I will just write 2 there, okay, which is not between 4 and 9. So it is going to give a error. So I am just creating an error here, a value error. I'm raising an error. So this can be done using the raise keyword. So there are like two sides of the same coin. At one point, we are just trying to handle an error. But on another point, we are raising some error. So that, raising the error so that our program will stop here and then it doesn't go forward because we just want to achieve something here. So that's why we want to raise some error. Now we are just expecting the user to give a proper input. So that's why we are just raising an error. Okay, so as simple as that, we have to just use the raise keyword. Okay, now what if, now I just want, okay, if the user is going to give me a particular input, then it's fine. But apart from that, I just want to show some error. So say for example, if the user is going to enter a string as quit, then it's fine. Then the program will keep on moving forward. But apart from that particular string, if he gives any input, then I want to throw the error. So in this case, I'll be just using an if statement, if, and let me just write it as a double equals to, and then you can write any string. I'm just using this string as an example. So if I write quit here, and then if I print, okay, let's see the output now. So enter any value between 4 and 9. Now I'll just write this. Okay, then just a moment. Okay, see, I have to just put another thing here. I'll write elif. See, just a moment. Okay, no. Please wait just a moment.
I am Raj. I'm audible.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe that error was due to that typecasting because you give a as an integer and you are
Ah,
giving value
yes.
as string. That's why.
Yeah, typecasting. Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
See, here it is integer, right? And I'm just giving a string. So that's why it is giving an error. So what I need to do, I just need to do typecasting here. So I'll just write int here. Nice observation. So very good. So what's your name?
Ronak.
Ronak. Very nice, Ronak. So here we are going to do typecasting. So I'll just write int a here. And then this also I'll just convert into integer. I hope, yeah, this is fine. Let's write that string. Again, it is showing the error. So what's wrong now?
In line 19, you already typecast it, the a variable. So you need to remove from there. So you need to do, I believe, in the string so that it can take the quit value.
So what's wrong now? Can anybody tell me what's wrong now?
There is a space before which
Sorry?
when you are inputting, right? You are putting one space and then you are writing quit. So I think the string is not print. Yeah, don't put the space here.
Oh. Okay, so it gives me you choose to quit the program. Okay, so like that, we are just going to particularly if we just want the program, you know, for a particular string, we just want to carry on the program, then we can use this if statement, if and elif. But if you just write an input which is not between 4 and 9, then it is going to definitely, you know, we are going to raise the error in this case. So this can be done using the raise keyword. Okay, so this is what I was just trying to convey, and see, that was nice observation. So that really, you know, we can find out if we are really focusing in the class or not. So, you know, that's why I just showed that thing. Very good. So hope everyone has written the code. And one more concept we will be taking. That means using the shorthand if else in the Python. Okay. I hope everyone has understood raising error in Python. Now we will just move on the next concept using shorthand if statement. So I'm going to create two variables. So let me just write as 44. And I'm going to print capital A here. If, see, I want to print capital A if, so I will directly write the if statement here. And then I'm going to write the condition. So it's like print this capital A if some condition is satisfied. So I'll write A greater than B. Okay, so if A greater than B, then print A. Else, so see, I'm not using that indentation and going to the next line and writing the body of if statement, writing the body of else statement. No, nothing of all that sort. I'm just writing this within one single line itself. So for else, I just want to print maybe, okay, equals to. All right. Now, if this is also not satisfied, then I just want to give some other condition. So if A equals to B, print equals to if A equals to B, else print capital B. This is the shorthand if else statement I have used. Now let's see the output. So A was initially 44, then B was 4404. Now print A if A greater than B. So here A is not greater than B, so A will not be printed. Else print equals to if A equals to B. They are not equal, obviously. So this equals to will also be not printed. Else print B. So we can see the output capital B here. So this can be done within single line itself. You don't have to use those indentation and all. So this is shorthand if else in Python. I can also write like this. Print some number if A is less than B, else, okay, not in that, print 9 if, so I have to go outside, not in the print. So I just write if A less than B, else this thing, double quotes. Okay, let's see the output. So it gives the output as 9 because here A is less than B. Okay, now what if I give A greater than B, what will be the output? Can someone answer?
Capital A.
Capital. Okay, let's see the output. Capital A. See, for this one, the output will be this double quotes, which is empty. Okay, for the first one, it will be the same output, capital B. And for the second one, yeah, it will be that double quotes because else is getting executed. Here A is greater than, A is not greater than B. So the else will be executed. Okay, now I'm just going to change my variables. Now let me just write here as I will increase the A now. So I'll just write 4 for some value. Okay, let's see. What will be the output now? For both 9. Capital A. Huh. Okay, good. So let's see. We can see capital A and 9 will be the answer. Because here in the first one, this condition is satisfied. Print A if A greater than, yeah, it is greater. And for the second one, 9 will be printed. Print 9 if A greater than. Okay. So this is the shorthand if else statement. All right. I hope you have written this code. Just a moment. Okay, next thing is how importing in Python works. We are going to study about the import keyword in Python. So let's see. Importing in Python is the process of loading code from a Python module. If you just want to use the Python module, you are going to use the import keyword. Okay, so this allows you to use the functions and variables defined in the module. So whatever the module you are going to use, from that, you can use the functions and the variables, which is already there. So say for example, I want to do some mathematical operations. So I'm going to write import math. I'm just using the math module in Python here. So first I want to import that module. Then only I can use the functions and variables from that particular module. Okay, now once a module is imported, you can use any of the functions and variables defined in the module by using the dot on notation. So you have to use the dot notation to use any function or variable. Let's see. We are just going to write some code. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just write here import, then math. After that, let me use this flow. Okay. So here I'm basically what I'm doing, I'm just using the float function here. Okay, so if I just write here x equals to so actually it is just going to convert, sorry, actually this is not how I should use it. I'll just use some other example. So basically what I was trying to say is that we can use the floor, which is a function there in the math module. Okay, so instead of using that, I'll just write this in this case x equals to, say for example, there is a function called sqrt. Okay, so I'm going to use xqrt function from math module. So I'll just write math dot sqrt 9. Okay, and then I want to print. Let's see. So it gives me 3 as the output. Okay, so this is how I'm just going to use the sqrt function from the math module. Now if I just write here I'm going to use floor here. Then this will be the output. So this is floor division basically. So what it is going to do, it is going to remove the decimal part and it will just give you that integer, the floor function. And sqrt, we just saw, it is just going to give you the square root of any particular number. So we use the floor function and the sqrt function. Okay, now in this, we can use one more thing. We can use the from keyword. When we are importing, we can use the from keyword. So I can just write here from math. So from math module, so I'll just write the name of the module there. If I just want to import a particular function, so I write from keyword, the name of the module and the import, and then I will write the particular function. Say for example, sqrt come 5. I want to use those two. So I'll just write here instead of float. Okay, let me write in this way. sqrt line and then into 5. So that is the answer. We have used the square root function and the pi function. So this is how we can use import in Python. All right. So today, I'm just going to stop here today because from here, Dr. Mukesh will continue. So we'll just take a quick revision what we studied today. We just revised the concept of exception handling, which we studied in the previous session. And for the continuation, we studied about the finally keyword. So how we can use the finally keyword in exception handling along with try and except. So whatever is there in finally will be executed, whether it goes in try or whether the execution goes in the except. Okay, so we studied about the finally clause, and then we studied about raising custom errors. Purposefully, you want to raise error in your program. So that can be done using the raise keyword. Then we studied about shorthand if else statement. Instead of writing the general way using the indentation and all those, we can just use the shorthand if else. So this is more readable, right? So Python is all about its readability. So this is much more better than using multiple lines. So if we write the normal way, we will have to write 5 or 6 lines of code, but that can be done using just a single line using the shorthand if else. Then we studied about using the import, how import works in Python. All right, so that's all from my side for today. And from here, Dr. Mukesh will continue. So sir, please, you can continue.
Rak, hello everyone. So what we want to cover is the practical aspect and the importance of exception handling. Because we want to make sure when you start giving interviews and you actually start using exception handling at work, you should be able to understand the importance of exception handling. Why is it important, and how is it practically used? So we want to make sure you have the theoretical base, you understand the keywords that are used, but how to use it practically as well. So I'd like to share that. So exception handling, this is a concept which is applicable to all programming languages, Python being not an exception. There are two types of exception at a very high level. One is the design time or the compilation errors that you get. And the second is the runtime exceptions, for which when you run the code, you get those exceptions. So right now, when you not indenting the code, or you type a syntax which is not as per the Python language specification, you get an error, right? Saying syntax error if your indentation is not correct or anything. So that type of error is called a design time error, because you're writing your code, you're designing it. It's not running it. Before even running it, you're getting that error. And that error, the compiler or the interpreter is throwing that exception or that error for you. But there's nothing that you can do about it to customize it or modify it, because the intention of that design time error that you're receiving is to inform you to take corrective action. The second type that we are focused using try, catch, exceptions, and all that is for you as a programmer to write code in a way so that if it's meaningful for the user to be able to recover from exceptions or know that something unintended has happened. So there are various practical use cases where you would want to use exception. One example is, I'm sure you've experienced this when you're paying the light bill in India, or you're going on a website or something, you're making a payment or something, you get an error. And many times that error is not meaningful. It will just say error, an exception has occurred. But it really doesn't tell you what exception has occurred. It's cryptic in a way that you, as an end user, feel helpless and frustrated because it doesn't give you information where you know what to do. Do you resubmit it, or do you call some number and tell them what it is? So if you're shopping on Amazon, or let's say, you're buying something and you get an error and you don't know what to do with it. You don't know whether the purchase went through or not. So in that case, it is the responsibility of the programmer to be able to have exception logic written in your code, so that way the user knows that yes, they didn't have permission to do it, or the code didn't successfully run it, or whatever it is, but it has information, meaningful information, that the user can act on it. It is very important as well. Suppose you're putting in a service request for repairing your washing machine. In that case, an error occurred. Now, even if you do exception handling and say, sorry, an exception has occurred, please call this number. That is good, because now you're telling them what to do and you're giving them information. But at the same time, you need to have enough information so that when the person calls that number and say, I had an error occurred, it's actionable, where you can say, okay, you have thousands of customers visiting your website. Which error occurred, what it is, so you can actually look into it and see if the payment went through, or the request has come in, or so on, or whatever that intended action was. So when you're raising those exceptions, first it has to be meaningful, so that the person understands what happened. But more important, it's informative, and it's telling the user what corrective action to take. And third, that that exception which is raising should capture enough details. And typically what we do is we log those exception or those errors. We write information like, this customer with this ID at this particular timestamp, this error occurred, and so on. So when you call that number, the person can look at that log file or something and be able to trace and say, okay, I understand exactly what happened. They can quickly be able to know whether the transaction went through or is in a suspended state, or so on. But it's actionable and meaningful for the person who's on the phone to act on it. So when you're writing an application which is end user or customer facing, it is important that your exception handling process is actionable, is meaningful, and something can be done about it. So that's very important. Second use case, let's say I'm writing a game, and I'll give a practical example. We were working in a company where it was a gaming company. There was millions of lines of code. You as a programmer would be working on one module, one small component of that code, which is barely 100 lines, right? Now, if it's very common for beginners and freshers to not anticipate all the paths that your code will run through. For example, in this case, right, the example which Anurag showed, you may forgot to typecast your data type from a string to an integer, or something might someone might enter an input which is out of range, because when they were calling your module. So today we learned that if you say import math, math is a module. It's nothing but group of code logically put in a module. So all your mathematical functions will be in this module called math. So if someone is importing your code and they're trying to use this function, it gives them this weird error. It's a runtime error. They're running this code, it compiles fine, it doesn't give any syntax error or anything. They're able to use your code, but your code is throwing an error. And most of the time, we don't know so what happens is one module A calls module B calls module C calls module D. So there's a hierarchy of modules calling one each other. Which module failed and which module had an exception, it's going to be a nightmare if your specific module is not what we call as raising an exception. So it's very informative if we know which module is raising an exception, so that way you can know, okay, I need to make a change in the code, and I can throw something which is meaningful. So even if your code is not customer facing, but it's one part of a module of thousands of lines of code, which is very much practical. Many times when you're learning Python, you expect you should know end to end and understand each and every line of the code. Not realistic, because the way software industry works, everything is modular. There's a concept called object oriented programming. So in that case, everything you look at it is object or a module. That functionality is encapsulated in a module. So it's very much practical that you'll be working on a large code base, thousands and millions of lines of code, but you'll be working on a very small aspect or a small part of it. So in that case, if your code is not doing exceptional handling, your supervisor will immediately say, have you not done programming before? Right. So it is that important. So many times in the interview, they'll ask you, uh, what are the best practices that you use when writing code? So one of the best practices, you always handle exceptions. You always catch exceptions, right? So when you're writing those exceptions, again, it should be meaningful and actionable for this other developer who's consuming your module, who's consuming your code, to be able to know that they need to pass something which should be within the range, or what that specific error is, so that they can take corrective action. So it's not necessarily the end retail customer who's using the application and you're throwing the exception, but it could be another team which is consuming your code. So if similarly, if you're consuming someone else's code, and if you don't know which module failed and where that exception is occurring, you have to then use debugging and figure it out. And that happens many times. Many times, in fact, even when you're using a compiled language like Java or C++, many times you get this error and you have no idea what it is, because that error was in a module, but that module is calling some other module. So you have to actually debug and figure out what that error is. So that's why it's very important that you handle those exceptions. Another important point to remember is that when you're catching these exceptions, there's something called as a base exception, which means if there's a problem, then it catches a generic exception, right? That's a base exception, which means your code is saying there's an exception. There's something which wasn't anticipated, something that I didn't anticipate and has occurred. So it will give you a base exception, a generic exception. And with that generic exception, you can just say, please call this number, because you don't know what has happened, but at least you're informing the user that something wrong has happened, please call this number. But you don't know exactly what has happened, because you're not catching this specific type of exception. So in the previous class, Anurag showed that you can catch multiple types of exception, and some of these exceptions are very specific. For example, if you are trying to read a file, and you can just say you can catch that exception. Now it will throw you a generic exception for many many reasons. If the file doesn't exist, or if you don't have permission to read the file, or the file name is not there, right? It's a different file name, so it doesn't find the file. So there could be many many reasons, but those many reasons are mapped to a general exception because you don't know what it is. However, if you know that these are some of the possible exceptions that occur, right? So if someone is using your code and they don't pass in the correct file name, then it is not your fault that they passed in an incorrect file name. But you should give them that information saying this file doesn't exist, right? So the more specific exception you capture, the more meaningful and specific message corresponding to that exception class you can bubble it up. So you can specifically tell them, sorry, you don't have permissions to open this file, or sorry, you don't have, this file does not exist. So you can be very specific. But if you don't know what those errors are, then you just at least capture a generic one. So the best practice is always definitely capture the base class, the generic exception. And if you know what the specific ones could be, capture those as well. So you can give a meaningful customized message that the end user can understand. And the end user could be another team of developers or could be your end customer. So that way, you're truly using the power of exception to communicate and not make your end user frustrated as to what's going on. So many times when you write code, there would be someone superior or someone who would be reviewing your code. So in the code review checklist, one of the things we check is to see, did you handle exceptions in your code? Did your code gracefully exit? Many times what will happen is beginners they will forget it because they're not just used to catching exceptions. They'll have no code to catch the exception. So in that case what happens is it will give you some error, but that error is defined by some base class in Python. So you cannot customize it. You don't know what it is. So that's why in your code review the first thing we check is, are you handling exceptions and so on. So that's all I wanted to share today to understand so that you have a good understanding of why exception handling is so important. Does anyone have any questions? Not, we can have another mind relaxation technique and wrap up for today.
Dr. Mukesh, can I ask a question?
Sure, please.
So thank you for elaborating on the use of exception handling. I just have one question. You elaborated that the basic thing, at least the basic thing that we need to take care while writing the code is handling the generic exception. So like in Java, we have this exception class, and I guess even in Python, the same class is there. So suppose I handle at least this basic exception by writing a try block and writing that exception as E. Then is there a way in Python that I'm not aware that what possibly could be the exception in that block of code, but exception E, then E dot get which kind of exception has occurred? Is there any way to retrieve from that object of generic exception class that will give me this exact error?
Usually you will have, so the way it works is, you have base class exception E, and then you have multiple class inheriting from it, right? So in that case, usually what we do is we specifically list that class. So instead of
Okay.
using E dot, you need to know what that IO exception class is or what that specific exception class is. So that way you specifically know which exception class to call. And that's how we typically do it.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mukesh.
Any other questions? Does anyone have any question about why do we do exception handling? Why is it important? How to do? Anurag has covered it, but it's important for you to get into the habit of doing it. Now, one other point I want to mention is beginners. I don't want you to commit these mistakes, which typically a beginner will do. A beginner, what they will do is they will start their code with try, and at the end of the code, put the catch. Uh, don't do that. Why? Because when you're putting at the start of the program and you're putting at the end, there's so much functionality in your code. Let's say you've written 200 lines of code and you put one try at the beginning and one catch at the bottom, and you say, well, you told us do exception handling. I did exactly the same thing. I caught my exception as well. Well, there's a problem with it. In those 200 lines of code, there's so much functionality over there. You won't be able to specify which exception. And even if you do, your program is, it's probably stuck at line number 10. And, you're not able to inform user that, the program is stuck at line number 10 because of this reason, because it's so generic enough. So try to use multiple try catch in your code. And the try catch should be at a logical level where, for example, you're reading a file and, you put some content in the file, then you close it, and then you're doing something else. So write the code in a modular way where it's a logical it's doing something logical, and you should have multiple try catch, so that way if one logical block fails, you'll know exactly which specific exception class to use. So you'll achieve the objective of using exception class, which is being able to inform and give meaningful information to the end user to take corrective action. So if you just put it one try catch at the end, it'll be very generic. So in order to benefit from it, you'll have to use multiple try catch, because if you're reading a file, and then you'll have file related exception class. If you're trying to manipulate data in an array, and you're doing a lot of data processing, you can have a try catch block related with that processing, so you know where the exception occurred. It occurred during the file read process, it occurred during the file processing, or it occurred during the file end process. So something to be mindful about, so that way you can manage those exceptions well. And many times what we do is we also we haven't covered in the class, but we will. We do what is called as logging. We log those errors when those errors occur. So you put those errors in what we call as a log file, right? Which is nothing but a record of all happens. So every time you visit a website, it has a log that someone from this IP address at this time accessed this page, and everything that happens, it goes in the log file. And then you can say, okay, this error occurred. You can put that in a log file as well. And those log files are then used by other application monitoring tools like Splunk, uh, Grafana, and so on, which are strictly just reading those log files. So then by reading those log files, you know that something is happening. Your application is not behaving correctly, it doesn't have access to read a file, or something is going on. So before your users start complaining, saying I'm not able to access the website or so on, your code, if it's encountering any issue, it will put it in a log file, and you will have these application monitoring softwares which will look for any critical errors and then send an email or an alert or so on saying your website is not functioning. So before you start getting a lot of customers from calls from your customer that your website is not functional, you can proactively take corrective action. So along with exception, it's important to log those errors as well, so that way you can monitor your application. So that's a little bit more advanced, but there are application monitoring softwares which are just looking at those log files. Because when the hackers they do it, they try to trace and hide their marks by removing those log files as well many times. But it's always a good practice to log your errors in a log file as well.
Thanks, Dr. Mukesh. Just one question. For the exception handling, can I not, like, does Python allow to create a separate class which I can import in my Python program and have the exception handling there? So anything can be logged through instead of writing the code in the main class. I can write all the exceptions, kind of creating a exception library and just invoke the functions what I need.
Absolutely. So in Java, there's something called as log4j. So it's exactly the same concept. Instead of each developer writing their own exception logic and doing it, usually organizations they will have their own implementation of an exception class library, or there are open source exception libraries. Like for Java, there's something called as log4j, which you will build on and inherit it as well. So that way you don't have a lot of the burden as a developer to do it. So when you join the organization, what I would suggest is look and read their existing code, see how they are handling exceptions, and try to copy that same style. uh, it is very rare, highly unlikely, unless you're working for a startup, that you will be starting from scratch, writing any line of code. Usually you will be working in a large organization where existing code is already there. So instead of trying to figure out what exceptions should I do and everything, spend some time to familiarize how the existing code is written. And that way you can ask a question saying, is there a library I can use? Is there a class that I should be using, which does the logging and everything instead of me doing it. Many times what happens as a newbie, as a beginner, we are afraid of asking questions, and then we do unnecessarily redundant things. But all we had to do was just ask. So it's a very good question. Look at the current implementation, see what that organization is doing before you start writing a lot of your exception handling. Any other question? Or in general, any other question from previous sessions as well, feel free to ask.
I have one question. So indentation is kind of the mandatory for Python programming.
It is the syntax. So it is mandatory because if you don't, your Python interpreter won't be able to interpret your code, and it will give you an error saying, it will give you a weird error. It doesn't really specifically sometimes say it's an indentation error, but you get used to it once you start working with it. But that's a design time error. So you cannot control what Python says. So you just have to get used to what the interpreter says based on the indentation. So you cannot customize what Python is going to say. That is the functionality of the interpreter, which is interpreting your lines of code and compiling in it as well. So you can't control it. But yes, without that, your code won't work.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Mukesh, one more question. So far what we are learning in Python is, if I'm not wrong, we are trying to get acquainted with the procedure-oriented aspects of Python programming. But when we talk about the exception handling and writing custom exceptions, so custom exceptions are nothing but the custom classes. So the object-oriented aspect of Python, are we also going to study that in depth in this course?
Yeah, if there's interest, we will. We are here to serve all of you so that you benefit. We will, if you find that, if there's interest in doing it, we'll definitely cover it. Just since you brought up the question, it's a very good question. Uh, Python is used more for data analysis. When it comes to building a new system, no organization will use Python to create a new system, right? If you want to create a new database, you won't write the code in Python. You will start in Java probably.
Okay.
But the strength of Python comes in data analysis. You've got data you've got your sales data, you've got your inventory data, you've got all different kinds of data, and you want to join that data to analyze that data. You want to use Python for forecasting the customer growth. What would be the percentage of your customer growth based on which you will give guidance to your shareholders saying, I'm expecting 3% customer growth. But that 3% customer growth in the next quarter is based on some numbers. You cannot just go to the shareholders and saying 3%. Just to raise the stock value, right? There's a lot of calculations, forecasting going on. So all that number crunching, that data analysis, Python is really good at it. That's where the power of Python comes in. So the exception handling, I want to give you the concept because it applies to all programming languages. But realistically, practically, you will never write something in Python to create a new system. Yes, you can create, you can use Flask framework in Python and put it in front end, but highly unlikely, unless it's a startup or something. Most of the time, Python would be strictly used for using any of the AI machine learning algorithms or data analysis. But if you want to build your career in machine learning AI, Python is a must because Python it can be object oriented and it can be procedural. Power of Python comes because you can run it in a distributed, clustered environment. So you can have that same Python code running in parallel. That's why Python is very powerful when it comes to AI. So there are lot of Python libraries, PyTorch and many others, which you can use to implement your predictive analytics or advanced analytics algorithm, which uses the data. So in that case, yes, we'll do exception handling, but a data scientist or when you're playing with that data, there's no end user. It is like you are the only user. So many times they don't do exception handling because it's a one-time analysis. But if it's something repetitive that they need to do, then yes, you should do exception handling. But most of the time, it is just using those AI libraries. Now, those AI libraries like PyTorch, they would do exception handling. So if you're using PyTorch and you don't know why this program abruptly, gave this exception, it's running out of memory or, something went wrong, then yes, those it will have that exception handling so that you know why it is failing, where it is failing. But data analysis is one of the most common use cases for Python.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mukesh. I mean, this was really a great insight for a person like me who has studied Java, because now it is very clear that what is the main objective and real life implementation of Python. So it's mainly used in, as you rightly said, that machine learning algorithms and artificial intelligence. So are we planning to have any kind of sessions around those libraries which are used in data analytics?
Yeah, we can. I mean, we are here to serve you. So if as long as it benefits the group, but we strongly believe that is the trend, that is the nature. So that's where the jobs are. So we can certainly do it. We've got a lot of PhDs in our group, but we'll have to first cover the theoretical basis of what is deep learning, what is machine learning, what
Right.
is convolutional neural networks, because otherwise, if you're using those libraries as a black box, it you won't really enjoy it because it's like you're driving a car but you don't know where the buttons are to use the power of that car, right? So to understand that theory, we'll have to do a little bit of theory and then we can cover it. But I can do a quick 1 hour session to get you started, but it'll benefit most when we do more, a little bit more deep dive rather than just 1 hour.
Yeah,
But
sure,
yes,
sure.
yeah,
That
feel
will,
free to voice your opinion of what you would want, and we'll definitely cover it because we've got faculty who can cover any topic as well, including AI machine learning. So we can cover the theory and the practical aspect using Python. Another important use case is in cloud, right? Many times we have to move data from one system to the other, or we have to process the data and transform the data. So in that case, there are these ETL tools, especially for cloud, like AWS Glue, or in Azure, you have Azure Data Factory. So many times, to process that data, to move from one system to the other, we implement what's called as a data pipeline, right? A pipeline allows you to move the water from one place to another. Similarly, you're building a data pipeline to move data from one system to the other. So in that case, Python is also used. There's something also called as serverless computing in cloud. So we had a cloud series session Brother Prashant conducted last year. Those recordings are there on YouTube as well. But if you want to become a cloud engineer and do programming for the cloud, Python is very helpful over there because uh, you have to move the data from one system to the other. Data processing is very common. So if you're building an API, and then even if you're building an API, application programming interface, which is exposing your data as a service, then in that case also you can use Python as well. So that's another important reason why you should know Python. But many times you can process that data in multiple languages. One of the most common tools for data processing is called Apache Spark, and there's a managed version of Apache Spark called Databricks. If you're looking for a job of a data engineer, you you must have the keyword Databricks on your CV. If you have Databricks on your CV, you will get a job because every organization that I've worked with almost uses Databricks to process that data. Because when you're running these AI machine learning computational libraries, you need to run it in parallel on a cluster. A cluster is nothing but a collection of nodes, and each node is a server. So you combine multiple servers, and we call it as a cluster. So you need that computational power. So to run that Python code, we use Databricks. So just Google and get yourself familiar with Databricks. And it's Databricks has these notebooks. So if you're using Anaconda as your Python IDE, Anaconda also has Jupyter Notebook. So if you know what is a notebook, how it works, we can do a session on it. And then if you just play around a little bit with Databricks, you will get a job. If you don't get it, let me know. I'll be surprised if you don't get a job if you have Databricks on your CV.
Thanks, Dr. Mukesh. This was really helpful. In fact, like if
Absolutely,
possible,
Dr. Mukesh. Quite insightful. Sorry,
if
please
you,
continue.
yeah, if you have some availability or whenever you get a chance, can we have an hour session just to introduce Python towards machine language? That will be really helpful.
Probably in the subsequent session, I'll explain it to you. I'll give you a brief summary version of what is machine learning and
Yes.
how what the concept is. If you get the concept, because there's a lot of math in it, and the math is quite honest, very boring. It'll
I
make you
agree.
fall asleep.
I'm
But
not.
what is important is the concept. So you can skip the math, but if you understand the concept, what is a classifier? What are the
Yeah.
different types of classifier? What is a neural network? And in general, what is a neural? How does a neural network work? What are layers, and what is a hidden layer? What is an input layer, output layer? What is feature processing? Once you understand that basic terminology, you can still be a good data scientist, and you can process that data without having a PhD and without being an expert in math, because that's the whole idea, that you're using these libraries and you don't have to understand that detailed math, because it's very boring. The fun part is using those libraries to analyze the data. And if you go on websites like Kaggle, Kaeggle, you can get a lot of sample data sets, and there's so many data sets. You can actually start playing with it, and you can analyze that data, because the more you do it, you'll get that experience, and you can put it on your CV. Analyze this data set to do this type of processing and so on. You can actually play with it without understanding all the details, the math and everything, but you can practically do that analysis using these Python libraries. That's where it is real fun, and we can actually show you how to do it.
Thank you.
Dr. Mukesh, that will really be a great help actually. So we can definitely, we will request you to conduct one such session wherein you can just give us this summary of the way Python is practically used in machine learning algorithms, and everything that you just explained about the neural network layers and the data breaks and the website that you mentioned wherein we can analyze the data. That will really be a great help. So we will it's a request. So if you can conduct such session. Yeah.
We'll do that. We'll cover a little bit of the theory, but what we'll do is, going forward, uh, whatever theory we cover, I'll share the practical aspect of that theory, so that way, and if is potential interview questions as well. So that way, those who are beginners, they will understand the practical aspect of it. And those who are already coming from a Java background or so on, we'll share a little bit more advanced, so that we will be able to make sure the beginners don't get lost, and those who already know it, they're learning something more from a practical aspect. And then towards the middle or the end, we will conduct one session for object oriented programming, like the basic concepts. What is object oriented programming? What is polymorphism, encapsulation? Because that is basics. It applies to any object oriented language. We can cover that. And we'll cover at least one freshers or beginners session on AI machine learning. What is machine learning? What are the common tools? And we can actually show a demo, and it'll be fun. So you can at least get started, and we can have more detailed sessions on it then.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think thanks. for putting that link. So the Kaggle link, I think I misspelled it, but yeah, this is if you want to have fun with data processing and if you're looking for a job for data analysis, absolutely must to visit that website. And there's a lot of sample code. Get used to reading the code. You should be able to look at someone's code in a notebook and figure out what it is doing. And once you feel comfortable that you are able to do that, you will also you will become a better programmer because you will see the different styles and how other programmers are writing it. So do spend some time looking at other people's code. Now you'll see how other people's are handling exception, because now you have a keen eye towards it as well. So the more code you read, the more code faster you can write as well. It's just like any linguistic language, right? The more accent you listen to, you'll be able to understand and pick up multiple accents really fast, and you will build your own style of way of speaking as well. Same thing with programming. So get into the habit of reading other people's code, because that comes in really handy when you're working in a large organization where there's a lot of existing code, so you know exactly how to pick up and fit your code into it then.
So thank you, Dr. Mukesh.
Yeah. Prafulla, the link is already posted. Just scroll up, you'll find the link. It's kaggle.com. Okay. Any more
Yes.
questions? We can continue next week. You can ask me any questions next week as well. I'll be there. Okay. If Raki's there, we can have another mind relaxation technique.
Everyone, we'll try to keep it brief because we've already exceeded our time limits today. As usual, we end our sessions with a mind empowerment technique. And today our theme will be power of concentration. The best and easiest way to concentrate. Everyone, please mute yourself. Dhyanan, kindly please mute yourself.
Sorry.
Thank you. The most easiest way for concentration is to turn on some music. That's the beginner's step. It will prolong our concentration power. Otherwise, if we just try to sit in silence for a few minutes, we will notice that after just a few minutes, our mind will start wandering again. And before we proceed by focusing on this music today, let's understand the benefits of the power of concentration. Why is it a mind empowering technique? Because a focused mind is a lot more productive. A focused mind is very alert in discerning, in making decisions. A focused mind is a calm and stable mind. And this state of the mind only serves us and others, as we are no longer victims of where the mind takes us. But the mind, unknowingly, is in full control of where we want it to focus on. So let's start our concentration now. Just relax and sit back. And listen to this music. And focus on just one aspect. Silence, tranquility. Focus on feeling calm. Focus on relaxing. Focus on a different dimension than this world of five elements. Focus on the inner energy of peace. Just simply turn within. We can use this visual image as well to stay focused. And use music as an aid. Just focus on feeling relaxed and calm. And from time to time, whenever we see that our mind is taking our control over our stage, we simply just turn on any music, calming, soothing music. Turn within. Close our eyes. Reconnect within the inner peace. Experience some tranquility for a few minutes. And then come out performing the role. The mind will be much more efficient, much more obedient. As it begins to stabilize, as it begins to train itself to a more calm state. With this, let's end our session today and try to put this technique in use in the upcoming week and experience its benefits. Very simple technique. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend and a great week ahead. Thank you.